Hi, I'm Draken and this is the DrakenGameWerks, and this is my little tutorial to show you how to make more interesting 1 block wide walls. And by 1 block wide or 1 block thick, we mean that they don't come out more than about 1 block. A lot of build tutorials out there that are saying when you make your walls interesting, you should maybe move to 2 to 3 blocks. And if you don't do that, then your walls just simply aren't going to be interesting, and that's just not true. You can actually make some very interesting walls that are only 1 block thick, and there might be lots of reasons you want to build a wall that's only 1 block thick. For example, you may not have the space in your build to be able to build more than 1 block wide, or also these techniques as well could be used later on to take back and use with walls that are actually thicker, that are 2 or 3 blocks wide, and use these same techniques to make them look even better. So let's jump into the tutorial, and I'm going to start very basic and we're going to move on from there and show you how you can take walls like the 2 plain walls you see behind me here. You've got like the stone brick wall and like a plain white concrete wall, and make them a bit more interesting in your builds and give you hopefully some ideas that you can use. So yes, to begin with, we have the plain walls. This is something that you see a lot of people using right at the beginning when they start Minecraft, and they just take 1 block and they build a wall. It's as simple as that, and there's not a lot really going on with it. I mean, straight off the basic, if you're happy with the way they are looking, in modern life, you could have walls that are very plain, and they would sort of look like this. But let's be fair, we're in Minecraft. We're here to try and make things look pretty, to make things look beautiful, and make nice things. And so you might want to do something extra with it. So starting very basically at the front here, we have the idea of putting patterns into your wall. Now, patterns in your wall can work really well, especially over big spaces, this big plain white concrete walls. You come up with some sort of pattern that sort of sits there of a different color, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a different color either. So for example, you could turn around and take the same color but with a block with a different texture in the same color and create a more subtle pattern in the wall, which just draws a little bit more interest over what is normally just the plain white wall, for example, or any other sort of plain walls. And patterns can take any sort of shapes, any sort of forms, and you can use multiple colors if you want to, and it's just about basically just creating a pretty design in the wall. It's not texturing, which we will get to in a minute, but it is giving you an idea of things that you could do that are just going to make that wall just be that a little bit more interesting. Moving on from that, we can have this idea of splitting your walls into 2 colors. So you have a bottom color and a top color. You see this a lot in modern building design, or at least in sort of more stately home sort of designs, where you might have, like you can see here, like the wood at the bottom. We've used stripped logs, I should say, at the bottom, and the plain white at the top. Generally speaking, they will usually say that you should turn around and use darker colors at the bottom and lighter colors at the top, and it tends to look a bit better that way. And so we've got an example here of just the blue and a white. Yeah, it's still fairly plain. We'll get into more interesting stuff in a second. But then we have, for example, the stripped logs here with the white concrete on the top. And you could even take this to sort of the more medieval builds and everything else by putting something like, a normal spruce log at the bottom here and going into the stone bricks there, which creates a little bit more interest that way. The next one we're going to look at is then borders around your walls. So what we do here is we place the blocks that go around the outside, and maybe even in the middles as well, and use another block to create this sort of almost frame around the wall itself. And with these sort of borders, this one here you see is a very typical one that you see a lot in sort of medieval builds. When people are building medieval houses, they just take a spruce log and they just put a couple on either side and one across the top. You might have a couple in the middle as well, and then just the stone brick across the middle. Now, if you're building 2 blocks wide, I know a lot of people say that you could turn around and bring these spruce logs forward, and that creates a bit of depth into the build, and that's certainly perfectly fine. But if you're limited in space and you're looking for a way just to make a stone brick wall just look like a little bit more interesting, this is one way you can do it without actually moving outside of that idea of the wall being more than 1 block thick. We can do the same thing in sort of more modern builds. You've got, for example, if we use the white powder, and it's just about basically finding a block that looks good as a border around it. And you can use all sorts of things. The logs themselves are a good idea. You can use pillars like we've got here with this quartz pillars on either side. You can go down and use various chisel blocks, work really well for creating borders, as we'll see in a second. So anything that sort of stands out. What I would say is if you're building borders, the best thing to do is to look normally for something with a bit of a texture on it, rather than it just being purely plain. So I wouldn't use concrete as a border to another wall normally, but I would use, say, something like this quartz pillar, because it's got a nice sort of texture to it, and sort of stands out a little bit differently to the rest of the wall. But borders don't just need to be around the edge of the wall itself. You can put them across the center here. Here's an example using the new chiseled deep slate block from 1.18. And yeah, if we put it in the middle there, I really love this block. I know it's meant to be a creeper face, but it works really well when put side by side and creates this really sort of interesting look to a border that you can use in a lot of your builds there. And it works with a lot of materials as well, this deep slate I found. It's a really nice addition to the game here. And you can put them in the middle like that, and that creates a nice divide in your wall there and separates it out a little bit. Or you could put it either in the bottom or at the top here, which creates a bit of a frame. And the idea of putting them along the bottom and the top works really well, especially if you've got a floor or a ceiling that looks very similar to your wall, and helps break up that sort of difference between what is the wall and what is the floor, or what is the wall and what is the ceiling, if we do go for the one that is on the top there. And just, again, just creates that little bit more interest in the wall itself. Going back to the idea of those split colors, those split color walls work really well when you put a border between the split colors. So normally you would have a darker lower wall and a lighter upper wall, but you can have the border be an even darker color. It should be a color that stands out compared to the other two colors, and you can then create this sort of split between it, which then looks very nice, sort of coming across here with this sort of darker color at the bottom, the lighter color at the top, and this lovely border through the middle. And don't forget as well, you can use other types of blocks as well. Be a bit creative in what you're looking for in blocks. Like, for example, these are workstation type blocks here, or rather we've got the blast furnace here, which we put the blast furnaces facing towards each other across the top with one facing out, which almost looks like you've got this grill sort of almost ducting going across the top of the wall. Whereas on this one, we've used at the bottom here, these are beehives facing the opposite direction. So we have this kind of weird wooden texture at the bottom, followed with the stone bricks up above. As another example of how we can expand our borders, we can use multiple different blocks to create borders as well. Again, here's our white concrete wall, but we've got now quartz pillars on either side, framing it on the vertical, but the horizontal is done with the quartz chisel block as well. Again, the chisel block's nice. It's got this kind of like pattern to it as well. So it's kind of going back to the idea of a pattern, but having this recurring pattern within the singular block that then gets repeated across and creates this lovely borders on either side. Next, we move on to texturing, which we've got two examples of texturing here. Now, texturing works really well. The thing with texturing is you can go a little bit of it at a time, or you can go really a lot of it. And it really depends on the look you're trying to go for. The idea of texturing is to break up the wall with similar style blocks that just create a bit more interest in the wall. So if we start with the one where we've only done a little bit, and this is perfectly fine. You know, if you want a wall that looks primarily that it's stone brick and it's not too run down, then putting the odd one or two bricks amongst it, or one or two other blocks amongst it, can actually work really well. And you can see we've only added 3 different blocks. We've swapped out some of the blocks for 3 other blocks. One's an andesite polished block, one's a stone block, and one's a cobblestone block. But it does break it up and make that wall just that little bit more interesting to look at. And then if we come over, you can see that we've gone to the opposite extreme here, where we've used a lot of different blocks of the same sort of color and mixed them in together to make a wall that basically looks like it's probably seen a bit of time. It's aged quite a lot. This is very good for medieval builds, for example, where they weren't building with just one type of stone or one type of brick, and there's multiple different stones, and maybe it's aged a bit and it's starting to break down a little bit. And you can actually decide and move between different types of bricks which you want to use for your primary. I mean, this one's just a jumble up of the whole lot, which creates this lovely sort of look that we've got here in the texturing, whereas this one is just primarily bricks. And I got an example just over here, we'll come back to these in a second, where it's just the stone, same sort of things we have with the stone brick, but it's just stone instead with a little bit of texturing in there, and that creates a different look that can also work just as well for like a building wall, especially if you combine it in with things like borders. We'll have a look at combining these together later, but yeah, you can turn around and get this really nice sort of look. But depending on what you use as your primary one, you can always use the other blocks then to actually be part of the texturing. Now, stone is a really good example of this. You can do this in various different types of material in the game. So like Deep Slate has examples that you could do it with. Blackstone has examples you can do it with in the same way, sort of this texturing. But with stone, you are actually very blessed to have a number of blocks that are available. And the idea is to get a number of blocks that are of a similar shade of color. So they're not like distinctly massively different, but also have a variety of different textures. So you've got your standard stone brick here, and then you can mix it in with both andesite as an andesite block, as well as the polished andesite block. I like the polished andesite block. It's one of the best uses for the andesite block is to use it sparingly, but it looks really nice because it stands out so nicely in the walls. Like if we go back and look at these walls, you can see where the andesite blocks are, and because of the nature of the texture there, it sort of pops out as this big square. You don't want to do lots of them, but one every now and then looks really nice in the wall and sort of pops out. And you've got cobblestone, which sort of looks like the wall has started to break apart a bit, again with the stone. And then we've also got the cracked stone bricks, which people sometimes forget about when building these sort of things, but they're also in there, especially if you're making something that has been weathered quite a bit and has seen quite a bit. So your texturing can be done in this manner. But as I said, you can also texture in other materials. Like for example, here we have the idea of the white concrete wall, and we've got white concrete powder, white wool can be used as a texture, and then also got quartz. It's a slightly different color, the quartz. It's a different shade out from the shade of the white, but it's close enough that it might just work within your walls. Some people might like it, some people may not. Again, as you go through these things, it depends on what is your personal preference. But these are just examples of how you could texture up your wall a little bit, even with a white wall. The odd thing with texturing with more modern builds sometimes is that it sometimes doesn't look quite right, because a modern build isn't normally as sort of run down and dilapidated as say like an old medieval build with the stone walls. But nonetheless, you can do it, and maybe you'll find a space where this sort of texturing is appropriate for what you're doing. And maybe you just wanted to keep it all in the quartz, or maybe you just want to keep it all with the white. I mean, the white powder with the white wool and the white concrete powder works really well together as well. So those are examples that you could actually use if you were trying to go down a concrete line and try and actually texture up in that way. Now we come on to gradients. Now this is a lovely technique that I haven't used properly before. So I did some research before doing this, but you see some builders out there who do build in gradients, and it looks absolutely beautiful when you do it. And the idea of a gradient is to transition from one color to another. So you'd like, for example, here we have a dark gray at the bottom, we have a white concrete at the bottom, at the top, and we're trying to transition the color between it. This looks really good when you do it on very big walls and you're something that's intended to be looked at from a distance, and it can look absolutely spectacular. And it's about using different shadings of blocks to actually mix between the two different colors. So as you can see, we've got some very creative uses here. You go from normal concrete through to a deep slate, through to, this is actually pistons reversed. So you've got the pistons sort of, the back of the pistons there, create that shade in there. Then we've got cracked stone bricks up to andesite, up to grey concrete powder, smooth stone blocks, diorite, and then up, or polished diorite, and then up to the white concrete. Now where this really works really well is when you start mingling it a little bit. So this is just a straightforward gradient. We've just done lines and layers, and yeah, this looks nice. This is good. You know, you could build a wall like this, and again, it would be interesting to look at. But if you're really going for the gradient look, then you really need to sort of mingle it in again. And going back to that sort of color theory again, it works best to do the darker colors at the bottom and the lighter colors at the top. But if we sort of stand back from this and sort of look at these from a distance, you can see how the gradient works moving between the two from a distance. So you imagine if you're looking at this from a really far distance, this can look really nice on the side of a wall coming through. And to create this sort of mingled in version, all you're literally doing is that when you're creating your layers of blocks in here, you are then mixing some of the blocks from the layer below and some of the blocks from the layer above into that one's layer. So it's not just all that layer. So for example, we look at this deep slate layer we got in front of us. If we took this line as it, we've got a little bit of gray mixed in every now and then at random. And we've also got a little bit of the back of the piston also mixed in at random in there. And we do this for literally every row. We've got a layer and then of pistons, which we've got the cracked stone bricks above it, mixing into it with a deep slate as well, just mixing up as well. And we carry on this sort of idea all the way up until we get to the very top there with the gradient that we were trying to reach. I just want to jump in here a second and tell you about a really useful website for actually doing your gradients with. So there's a site called HueBlocks. The actual web address is 1280px.github.io/HueBlocks/. I'll leave the link below in the description below, as well as posting it up on the screen here. But Hue Blocks is really useful because it's designed to work for Minecraft, to work out how to generate sort of gradients between different colors. So the way it works, I'll just show you this website here very quickly, is that we can work out how long we want our sort of gradient chain to be. Let's just stick with the 9 blocks for now, and we'll show the example that we got here. And then we need to define what's going to be our starting block and what is going to be our final block. So let's say I wanted to start with the dark grey concrete, or we wanted to start with some form of dark grey. So let's have a look what we got here. I can't find it here. I did have it earlier. Let's have a look. There we go. So there's the grey concrete. And then we wanted to go through to the white concrete like we have in our example over on the main page itself. So we'll just find the white concrete, which I think is that one. And then we can say, right, generate block gradient. And we click on that, and you'll see it now comes up with the list. And this is the ones we were just using in the tutorial here, that shows you the gradients going across. So you can actually just hover over the top of them and see which blocks they are. And this is a very useful way for generating your gradients. So if you're trying to work out how to do gradients, I highly recommend this website. It is very, very useful. Moving on from the gradients, then we can start looking at other ideas like algae covered walls. So with stone bricks, there is mossy versions as well, where you can mix either the moss block or vines with stone bricks to create a mossy version of the brick, which can look really nice if you're doing like we were doing like the textured walls a minute ago. And if you also included those in there, it could be like you have a bit of an overgrown ruin. And if you sort of mix it in with a texture thing, that can look quite nice in with the textures. But for some of you, you might be building, like, say, on the edge of a water. Say you're building like a dockside or something. And the thing to remember with water is that there is a lot of algae about in water. And this is where the mossy brick can be used quite nicely. So if we jump in the water here, you can see we actually have mossy bricks here just below the waterline and normal bricks above the waterline. Just represent that we have this algae in the water that is then sort of starts to coat the outside of the actual bricks itself. Now, of course, that still looks quite plain in itself, but we can start doing the same idea we did with the gradient, where we start mingling it around the waterline. So we'll take some of the algae bricks and actually put them in close to the waterline, not all the way, and you want it sort of getting less and less as we go further up the wall. So you can see that we got like 4 of them on this one out of 6 just by the waterline, and there's only 1 on the next row up. And likewise under the water, we take some normal stone bricks around the waterline and also mix those in as well. So it's not on every single brick that we see there, and that creates this nice effect as though almost like the algae is growing up the side of the wall. So if you're doing dock sides, it's a good idea to have a look at the mossy brick and using that around the waterline, because it just helps enhance that look around the waterline and makes it look like, yeah, we've got like this algae that's sort of growing around the place. Of course, we can take it, as with everything there, even further. And here what we've done is we've taken that idea of the sort of ruined wall that's been textured up, and we've included in here, like there's also the mossy cobblestone bricks, and you've also got now the new moss blocks as well that have just come out in 1.18. Again, the moss blocks I would use sparingly, especially above the waterline, but it could represent a very heavy algae buildup around in that sort of block area. And we can also go below the water here. And you notice we've got like an andesite brick here. You can't get a mossy version of it, but you can use 1 or 2 where we normally use the non-moss covered ones below the water. So you can still keep that sort of general look that you're using in your texturing, both above and below the waterline. And we use a lot more moss blocks below the waterline then, just to represent the heavier algae build up there as well. Now, one of the things with a 1 block wide wall is that people say, oh, they lack depth. This is why you need to go to 2 blocks or 3 blocks to create depth in it. And depth creates interest in the wall. Well, they are right that depth creates interest in the wall, but you don't actually need to go to 1 or 2 blocks to create depth. Now, here we come back to our idea of a ruined wall. And what we've done here is we've actually mixed in to that texture a number of stairs. So you've got like a little cobblestone stair there. There's an andesite stair here to make it look like there's a couple of bricks missing. So it's almost like parts of the wall have started to crumble away and fall apart. And it's not just that it's a broken plain wall, but we actually have some missing parts of it as well. So at random, we've replaced the blocks with the stair equivalent. Stairs are great, and you will see this used over the next several examples of ways of creating depth on a wall. So, and don't forget that you can use the stairs both the correct way up and upside down as well. So like this stair here, this cobblestone stair we see put in the wall, that's the correct way up. But if we come over here, we've got an andesite stair that's the opposite way around. And so on this line here where we've got just 1 block high, we actually have the missing sort of bit of it both above and below, so it still creates a bit of variance in height and just looks a little bit more random, especially if you're doing something like a ruined wall. And the great thing is that with the stair blocks, like we had 6 blocks that we could use for the texturing, there are 5 for the stone as well that can be used for texturing as well. So we are actually pretty lucky, especially with stone, that we have a lot of varieties there for doing this with. So we have the stone brick stair, we have the cobblestone stair, the andesite stair, the polished andesite, and the normal stone steps. And all of these can be used to sort of replace in what would have been the textured block in here to create that little bit more depth in the wall itself. And we can do this same idea. Here's a plain oak wall, but we've mixed in again. You can see there is a few sort of stairs sort of sitting around in the place. I'll put it on that one, which we got like there's an upside down stair. I'm putting it into the cursor mode so we can actually hover over the blocks and see them a bit more clearly. But you've got upside down stairs here, but there's also some right way around stairs here, and we put 2 together there, and it's almost like there's some planks missing from the oak wall. So even if you're doing like a plain wooden oak wall, if you mix a couple of stairs in like this, you can make it look like it's just lost a few planks or something like that, and again it's just been weathered a little bit. But we don't just need to use stairs for just making it look like it's missing stuff. We can use it as a form of decoration in itself to create borders still. So even if we're not using a different colored block, we can use the stairs in a creative way to actually make this sort of like almost like a thin indent going across the actual the wall itself here. So we've got here just normal right way upstairs. You could do this in both directions. But all you've got is then you've got this like half block high indent in the wall, which just takes a plain wall and just creates something a bit more interesting in it. Just as like something else to draw the eye to it, this little indent that goes across there and creates a bit of a border across on the horizontal line there. If you use stairs opposing each other, we can actually make that line even bigger. So we've got here an upside down stair at the top and then a correct way round stair at the bottom on top of these. And when they put together, you then get this like 1 block high indent that's actually sort of situated between 2 blocks. And yeah, you get this nice little indent again, which just makes the wall just seem that bit more interesting when you got it en masse. And it gives you a bit more to draw the eye to. And you don't have to even keep it in the same color. I mean, for example, here we've got the deep slate brick stairs here mixed in with the normal stairs, just to create both that idea of what we had with borders before, where we have a different color to create the border in the block. But we've also created depth with it as well by using the stairs to create that indent, I should say, into the actual wall itself. And if we put the stairs the other way around, we get a slightly different effect. So if we put the stairs so that the correct way around stair is on the top and then the upside down stair is on the bottom here, we get like a thin indent on either side here, and then we get this sort of block that sits here out in the middle here, and it looks like 1 block high block, but actually it's sort of half into each other block because it's the front of the stairs, and it creates just something a little different. And we can even do this with sort of different style builds, so we can use different materials for the wall, and there are many different examples of stairs, like here we've got the prismarine brick stair, that you can use to create your borders and just, again, just generate a bit more interest in it. Rather than it just being a plain border going around the wall, you could have something that has a little bit of depth to it as well. Now we move on to using stairs as a pattern. So we've used the stairs like a border before, but stairs have more versatile uses than this. I mean, I love using stairs in my wall builds because they can be used in so many different ways. Here we have sort of almost a stepped pattern. I suppose it almost looks like you got almost like something you could climb up on the walls. This could look really good in something like a crypt or something like that. But it's really quite simple. All you need to do is, you have your normal brick in there, and then where we have these bits, we just have stairs placed on top of each other. So these are all stairs the correct way around, and they just put one on top of each other, and we just do the same here and the same here, and it creates this lovely looking sort of wall pattern here where we have something that's not just a plain wall, but actually has a little bit of depth to it as well. It looks like almost got basically these little shelves or alcoves sort of built into the wall itself that you might want to store stuff on. And we can take this same idea, and instead of putting sort of the stone bricks in between it, we could just put just stairs across it. And we get, again, like these bigger shelves that look, again, like they might fit in a crypt somewhere or somewhere in a medieval build. These are really useful in that sort of sense as well, to sort of build across here. So that's another way in which you could actually use them. So you don't just need to keep them one at a time. You could turn around and put them as a big block together. Obviously, however you want to use them in that sort of manner. Another way of doing it here is we've got the stairs, a bit similar to like what we've got with the borders, where you have a right way around stair and then an upside down stair. Then we got a right way around stair and an upside down stair. So we've alternated the direction going up. And so this is, again, similar to that first one over there, but we've just changed the top stairs on each of the two blocks that turn around and put it the other way around. And we get like this small indent, again, that's about a block in size, though it's actually split between two blocks, and sort of just indents in the wall, almost like you've got, again, like these little alcoves built into your wall that you could be storing stuff in or something. Here's another pattern, again looking for patterns on walls, but without having it with patterns with depth on it. Again, we're using stairs. Once again, you can tell I like using the stairs. But in this version, what we've done is we've alternated the direction of the stairs as they go across. So the first row here, we've got, also first column here, we've got stairs the right way round. And then we've got the stairs upside down going on the next row. And then we've done back again to the right way round and then upside down. And you get this sort of almost checkerboard pattern going across your build there, which again is still solid. It still looks like we have a wall. This is still only one block thick, but we've created quite a bit of depth just in this wall here. And again, you don't need to keep using the same colors, like the same with the borders, and we can turn around and use them in different ways. And so we've used the sort of deep slate here to create these ones, and this one's actually done a little bit differently. So we have these bigger alcoves, and it actually has like a half block border around each one of the alcoves. And the way this is done is we've got the normal way stair here, and we've got an upside down stair here. But then these stairs are actually corner ones. So we do this by placing these stairs here, and then we place these ones from the side. So they're actually facing the opposite direction, and then the connected texture will come across. This will only work, this is the sort of smallest sort of size you can do this like. If you try doing it any smaller, then it won't work because the stairs facing each other will just form a hole instead. But you can make this bigger by putting more of these type in the middle if you wanted to. So that's another option that you've got there if you wanted to build sort of alcoves and stuff into your wall. And of course, we can mix this up and create patterns and borders and stuff like that. We can use like the chisel block. We got an example here. I can just imagine actually if you had this as a row of these chisel blocks across your wall, and then every now and then you use that same idea that we've used over here with the sort of the stairs upside down and then the two facing towards it to create the connective texture every now and then across the wall, so that you've got this sort of indent across it. That could look pretty interesting on your walls as well. Next we come to Holey Walls. No, that's not to say they're divine. What we're saying is that you have holes in the wall looking through to the other side. Now, this depends on your build. It may not be appropriate to put holes in your wall. You may not want to be able to see through. But it may be a case of you're building an interior wall where actually maybe you could see through. Or maybe, you have something that is behind here, even though we're not talking about going to 2 block thick. You may decide that you have something that's on the other side that you want to shine through the wall. You could put like glowstone or something on the other side. Or maybe you just want something that is sort of different to a window, but it still gives you sort of a look to the outside. So we get what we call Holey Walls. These are walls that are got holes in them in certain pattern designs. And you probably guessed it already. We're using stairs once more. And yep, we have, this is easily done. All we've done is just put the stairs facing this direction, heading on top of each other all the way across. So, right way up stair, all the way across. And then we've just put the same again on every single layer going up. And that creates this sort of pattern of sort of squares, sort of this almost grid pattern that appears on the actual wall here. The one thing, note of caution, if you're building with this is just to be aware, because of the way the stairs work, that on one side this will be 1 block wide here, the solid, and the solid on this side becomes 1.5 blocks because of the back of the stairs. So the way I've normally used, like I've used this pattern quite a few times, sometimes in my builds, and the way I would normally do it is I would have like a pillar or something in the middle, and then do it sort of going the stairs in both directions so that it looks even on either side, rather than trying to do this pattern all the way across. If we change around the stair directions though, we can actually get a slightly bigger sort of grid pattern. So here we have the stairs again, and this one's a bit more even, but you have a stair facing this direction, and then we got stairs facing this direction. And again, we've just put them on top of each other to create this sort of stepped up pattern that we have here, which can look quite nice on your builds. Then this one here is the idea of the sort of the hole, the sort of 1 block high hole. And this is really easy again to do. All it is we've got the stairs like we've done over here on this one, but then the ones above it have been done upside down. So you've got one facing this way upside down, and you can see the stair is facing the opposite direction upside down. I've just done that to create a sort of a bigger hole in the wall itself. This pattern here almost looks like you've got sort of almost interlocking tiles in there while still also maintaining the holes, and may at first look really, really confusing and complex to do, but actually, once again, really simple to do, because all it is stairs once more. And what we've done is we've put the stairs this way, the correct way up, and then we come this way, and these stairs are actually butted up against it, facing the same direction, but are just placed upside down. And then we've done the same over here. It's just repeated the pattern, and we've got the stairs the right way up, and then we've got the stairs upside down. And all the stairs here are actually facing the same direction. They're just either upside down or the correct way around, but it creates that kind of pattern. If we do the stairs though facing each other, we get an even nicer sort of interlocking sort of pattern coming down here, where it's almost like you've got these squares that just sort of seem to sort of grid up in just a single 1 block wide space. And the way this one is done is again fairly similar, but we have the right way around stairs on one side, and then facing the opposite direction we have the upside down stairs here, and it creates this sort of little pattern that we see here in the wall, where it's almost like the wall looks like it's supposed to lock together. So it might be useful for some sort of build where you want to have, like, I don't know, maybe some sort of secret passage, or it looks like it's, you know, some sort of locked up mechanism into there. Coming over here, if we're talking about Holey Walls and where we're putting holes into walls, then we also open up the possibility of using slabs in our design as well. So there are no stairs used in this design for a change, but we do use slabs instead. So we can just basically put slabs across the bottom here, and we can just create these sort of patterns that we see here. And of course we can alternate where the slabs are as well. So you can put them on the lower slab, we can put them on the upper slab, and we get these nice little sort of grid patterns again with the actual slabs itself. Moving away from the Holey Walls and going back to walls that are solid, we now move on to the idea of using walls as walls, because in the game there is actually a block called a wall block, which a lot of people tend to use for like farming, putting around the outside of their farms and their houses, so it's like a garden wall. But they can be used in your wall designs as well. So here we've got the same wall twice, and you see it looks a little bit different. So this is something to be cautionary about, and when using walls and being aware of this. And if you're aware of the mechanic with the walls, then you can actually use it to great effect as well in your wall designs as well. So what we have here is a normal stone brick blocks placed around with a stone brick wall in the middle, and you can see this is nice and smooth across the surface here. It just indents in slightly. Whereas this one, we have exactly the same blocks, but this one has like almost like this extra column built on each block, which can look nice. It's a nice design. It adds a bit more depth to the actual design itself, and that can look nice. And it depends on the look you're wanting to go for, whether you want to go for this design or whether you're looking to try and achieve the sort of the smoother look inside the indent here. And how it changes is if we come around to the back here, and it depends what's going on the other side here. So this is something to be conscious of with your builds if you're using these. So if there is nothing behind the wall here, if there is an air block behind here, then it will remain smooth. If there is a block behind it, then it's going to end up with this sort of column look here where it's trying to connect over. Now, why this may be important, because we were talking about, like, we're trying to make 1 block wide walls, not 2 block wide walls. But this is important because, for example, if you're building in a cave and you're building building this up against a wall only 1 block wide, and then you've got terrain behind it, then if there is blocks behind it that you're placing your wall up to, then this is going to act like basically creating the connection here. So you would need to cut out, like if you wanted to go for the smooth design, cut out an air block behind it. Or maybe you want this design and you can go for that. So just be aware that that's going to happen when you're using these walls as a form of wall. But the nice thing with them is you can put them in place and they basically form an indent in the same way that you might have done with some of the stairs here. But this is actually an indent on this row rather than, whereas the stairs would be actually over 2 blocks technically to create the same sort of space indent. We can also use these walls vertically as well, so we can actually stack them on top of each other, either with the air block or not behind. If you haven't got the air block behind it, will create a column going up here in the middle again, which can create a bit of nice sort of variety to it. But the nice thing with the walls is that they can be used, unlike the stairs, they can be used in this way to create a vertical indent rather than just horizontal indents as well, which can again just create more sort of depth to your design and more interest into it. We can also thus use them as well to create patterns in the wall that are indented in here. We've just created a cross design, very simple. We just cut out the 5 blocks in the middle there and just replaced it with the stone brick walls instead. And it creates this sort of indent in there. And we can take it and use it in one of these other ideas, and we can put another block in the middle of it here. So if we took this square, these are stone brick walls around the outside, and then we just put a sea lantern in the middle here. It's like a light source, and it's almost like it's framing the light source and enables the light source block here. And you can do the same with like glowstone, for example, or the new frog lights when it comes out in the new update. We could put these into the wall here, and it's just sort of almost like this being held into the wall and sort of stuck out there a little bit, and creates a bit of a frame around it as well. And we don't need to keep using the same type of wall as the sort of material we've used for the actual rest of the wall itself. Here, I quite like using cobblestone. Again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really like using the cobblestone mixed in with the build here. So we've got cobblestone walls here, creating a bit of a border across the middle here, an indented border, while we've got these across here. It's almost like actually these stone bricks have become the border to the cobblestone here, but it creates a bit more interest in the design. We can also use it just to create just random indents in the place with different color blocks. It doesn't even need to be the same shade. Here we're using the deep slate tiles and deep slate tile wall inserted into this bit. Again, creates a solid wall within the one block space, but again creates a little bit more depth. And if we come back to our idea of that ruined wall where we were using texturing earlier, we can do the same with some of the walls. So things like the stone walls, there are a number of wall types that will actually work for this. We have the cobblestone wall, we have the stone brick wall, and we've also got the andesite wall. And we can use those mixed in with that sort of build. So if we wanted to have like a build that was looking a bit more run down in its sort of text, and we were using quite a lot of texture, and actually maybe even if we weren't using a lot of texture, maybe it's just stone brick with just the occasional bit of texture, we do have the option to also mix it in with an indent with the stone walls itself, by using these ones as the walls itself and mixing them together, because they will connect together even if they are different walls next to each other, and they'll create this sort of connected texture over. Coming back to walls, not really the purvey of this actual tutorial, but I thought I would briefly mention the idea of windows as well for making your walls more interesting. Windows really could be its own separate tutorial, and really if we wanted to make nice looking windows, you would want to move more than one block wide because you want to build like frames around them, etc. But don't forget that windows can also create a bit of depth in there. So a lot of people will use the glass block, and that's okay if you want the glass to be flush with your wall, but if you're looking to add a bit of depth in here, then obviously the glass pane adds a little bit of depth when you put it in there. And if you're working on a medieval build, then maybe you might want to consider using something like fence posts instead to fill up the space, or even iron bars. And these are good alternatives to glass in a medieval build as well. It also doesn't fill up the whole block. It looks a bit more interesting than just there being an open space in here, and they're a good way of sort of filling the space up there. But I think I might do a window tutorial later on and sort of give some different ideas for building window tutorials as well, so keep an eye out for that one. Next up, we're going to look at trapdoors. Trapdoors can be also used for creating interest on your walls. Here we have, and there are a couple of ways of using it. Here we have the spruce trapdoor. So here we have it sort of put up into its vertical position. You always use them when you're using them as a wall decoration. You put them down and then flip them into the upwards position. But we now have this sort of almost indented, very big indent into the wall itself of the spruce trapdoor here, which looks really sort of quite nice in there. You've got almost like this sort of border in here. But if we come around to the other side, if you were to place the trapdoor on the other side, other way around, depending on which side you're viewing your wall, you then can have the trapdoor sitting flush into the wall itself, and you can create a different type of border, almost as though it's its own block in that sense, and use as a block in that way. The one thing with it though is it is quite, when you put it this way around, it is quite deep into here. So it can be quite a bit of a contrast. So it depends what you're trying to do. But if you wanted to sort of have it sit more neatly in there, and we're using here the dark oak trapdoor, which is also a very suitable one for building borders with, we can actually use stairs here again. So we've gone back to the stairs. We've got a right way around stair and an upside down stair here. So you've almost got it sort of stepping into it. And that looks a little bit, I think this looks nicer like this than it does with just the sharp some drop back here. We have almost like it steps back a little bit here into the dark oak trapdoors. And again, the dark oak trapdoors can be used like the spruce was there if you want to make it look flush against the wall. But if we do it this way around, I think this would look like a really lovely border going around the outside of, or going around an entirety of a wall there. Trapdoors can also be used in the vertical angle as well. The only thing is, obviously, we don't have the option of sort of sideways stairs here, so these will be deeper in, but then you can also sit and use them in the flush manner as well, so we can have a flush border going up of these. And again, as I say, I think the dark oak trapdoors and the spruce trapdoors both look very, very pretty. I really like the dark oak ones, and they work really well together. The only thing to be cautionary about is that not all trapdoors are solid. So you've got the spruce ones look solid, the dark oak looks solid, and there is also the birch one also looks solid. Birch is a little bit more difficult, I find, in using builds, just because of its nature and its design there. It looks like a nice trapdoor. Could work really well in like oriental builds, I suppose, or a sort of that sort of design of them. But yeah, here we got the same thing, just mixing it in with sort of a more modern build. We got some white quartz going across here, sort of smooth quartz stairs to sort of create that indent over here. And then we've put the birch in there. But this said, nonetheless, I think the dark oak still looks nicer because it creates a nice contrast if you do that in a sort of more modern build. So if we were to do like sort of have a white wall and use the quartz, smooth quartz stairs in here, I would then probably go more with the dark oak rather than the birch ones, because I just think that the contrast looks nicer. And I just think this trapdoor in itself just looks really great. It's a really great design of it. If we jump back to the idea of windows again, then we can also use the other trapdoor designs. So though there are the free trapdoors that we can use as solid designs, if you're having like Holey Walls or you're needing windows, then these trapdoors can also be used in all the rest of the trapdoors could be used in here. So we've got the oak one here, we've got the jungle, we've got the acacia, and then we've got the crimson and the twisted versions as well here, which just creates different sort of looks for your windows there. And again, might create something that's a bit more interesting in that design. And if we come around the other side, you can also sort of see how they look when they sort of sit flush to the wall itself. Depends what you're building as to how appropriate that may be, but yeah, there's an idea of a design there. Now at this point, we're going to step a little bit outside of the concept of 1 block wide walls. I'm still including them in because technically your walls are still going to be 1 block wide, but they do, with this idea, we can use the actual trapdoors to lay over the front of the wall itself. Now it does mean that they will stick out ever so slightly, but if part of your reason for your building your walls only 1 block wide is because you haven't got a lot of space, then and you wanted to create a little bit more depth in there, this is another way you could do it, because you could still walk past it. The only thing to be wary of, if you're pushing right up against the wall, you will get stuck on the trapdoors otherwise going past them, but it still gives you a lot more space around the outside here while creating depth. And you can use them then in this manner to stick up and create columns as well that aren't flush with the wall, but do come out just like this small tiny fraction of a block out the front of the wall here. We can do the same with the idea for the Holey sort of style design trapdoors. So here we've got the oak trapdoor and we've got the acacia trapdoor, and that enables you to put a different block behind there just to create something that's a bit more interesting. Like for example, with this one we have the glowstone behind there to create sort of almost like a light source in the wall. So there's another option that you can do. You could be using these type of trapdoors again, and then just whatever you put behind behind them can also be a little bit different to the rest of the walls. You just create a bit more variance in there in your wall itself. And if we're talking about building things on the side of the walls and just coming out that ever so slightly, then here's another way that you can create borders around your wall. And this is using just signposts with nothing written on them. We just put them on the wall and you can just line them across the wall, and it creates this sort of interesting sort of border that's like basically inserted in from the actual block. It's not the full block height going across it. And the nice thing with this compared to the trapdoors is that actually signs won't catch you when you're walking past them. So you can actually just walk straight up to the wall there and you still retain all the space in front of the wall. You just basically have this nice pattern along here. Another thing you can use is buttons as well. Buttons can be used for creating sort of text, creating additional sort of depth and indents and details on your wall. Again, like the signs, you won't catch on buttons. You can walk past buttons without an issue. And here we've used them just to basically create like rivets almost like at the corners of our sort of spruce log border that we did earlier in the actual tutorial, and it looks quite nice there. And if you're doing one of those ideas of a ruined wall, then you can go and use as well as a sort of an overlay, either vines, or on this one we've got the new glow lichen that comes from in the caves here. And these are great little blocks that you can just place on the outside, and it allows part of the texture to be seen of the block behind, but it also changes the texture based on the actual texture of the actual item itself on the top there. So we've got some glow lichen sort of taking up these blocks here, which just make them look a little bit different. And then we got vines here on this one. Now the thing to be wary of with vines is that vines will continue to grow when you place them on a wall, and they will eventually take over everything. And the way that you can control the vines means that you would have to use string, which string from a distance you can barely see it. In fact, you can't really see any of the string here, but you will notice the string a bit more closer as you come closer, because you can see that the box hovers as you're looking over it, and you can see that you've got this like thin white line that exists, and it also occupies this space in front of the wall here as well. But it's really the only way that you can control the vines. So if you don't want your vines growing, then you're going to need to place string around where you've placed the vines to prevent them from growing any further elsewhere around the wall. And finally, let's not forget that in the game itself, they have a bunch of things that are designed to be placed on walls as decorations. So we have banners. I mean, I've got the plain banners here, but they come in all sorts of different colors. You can put patterns on them. You've got picture frames, we've got item frames and glow item frames, and of course a variety of different torches. Obviously, I think torches have become a little bit old, and just placing a torch on the wall doesn't tend to look so great these days. I've seen some of the tricks that the people do with item frames though that look really wonderful. But don't forget, you also have 3 different types of torches, because we've also got the soul flame and we've got the redstone torch, which you could use for decoration in certain places. So if you're needing to decorate up your wall and you're stuck for anything else, there is the in-game items as well, which can make your walls just appear that little bit more interesting by placing them on the walls and around, rather than just being a plain wall. And this brings us to the end of the tutorial about all the various different ways of making interesting walls, but I wanted to show you some examples of how we can combine a lot of those techniques together to actually create really interesting walls. If you just wanted to just use one of those ideas and one of those techniques in your walls, that's perfectly fine. It makes your walls look better. But there is the option to actually take these walls and actually combine several of those ideas together to create even more interesting walls, or even more out of this world walls. So like here we have this wall. This is kind of like a rundown ruined wall, but you can see we've used several different techniques here. So we've got borders here. So we've got like a chiseled border going across the bottom here. We also have a deep slate border made up of stairs, like an upside down and normal way round stair here coming across this level here. Then we also have, breaking it up every now and then, would be these vertical borders, which is made out of the chiseled deep slate. And then we've used the sort of the grey stairs in the middle there to create that sort of step pattern in the middle to make this sort of vertical sort of pillar in the middle of the wall look more interesting. But then on top of that, we've also used the texturing technique, not just on the stone brick walls, and we've used this texturing technique with also using stairs to represent missing bricks. So we've used that in there, but we've also applied this texturing technique across the rest of it as well. So like we've done it with the deep slate, you've got some cobbled deep slate in there as well. We've got some polished deep slate as well to represent this sort of ruined effect is actually affecting all of it, not just this bit. And even with, like, for example, we've got this border of the chisel blocks here. I've put one cobblestone block in here, not overdoing it, but just to represent that part of the border. So we can still see that this is the border, but we do have a part of that that's ruined. And I've done the same thing on the vertical here as well, that we've actually taken a cobbled deep slate block in there and put it in there as well. That's worked. And then we've used also the variety of textures in the stairs here as well to create this ruined wall that actually uses quite a few of the techniques that we were just showing a minute ago. Moving over, we got another example of a wall that could be sort of found in sort of an indoor sort of space. And what we've done here is we've used the trapdoors, the dark oak trapdoors at the bottom to create a border at the bottom. Then we've got a layer of dark oak logs at the bottom here. So we have that sort of split wall where we've got the darker color at the bottom and the lighter color at the top. We've then used the chiseled blackstone blocks in the middle as a border between the two. And then we've also created a border around the sort of the white wall section, which we've also textured the white wall section a little bit. But we've got pillars on either side, quartz pillars, and then we've got the chisel quartz going across the top there, just to create this sort of build that could like be in like a stately home. You imagine like or a nice mansion or something like that. This can make a nice interior sort of wall in there. To show that we can do these sort of things with different materials as well, here's an example using a lot of the nether materials. So we've got netherrack and blackstone involved in here. So what we have here is, this looks like we've got a whole like netherrack wall up here. Actually, there is no solid netherrack brick blocks in here. This is all either, we've got stairs on the bottom, on the top here, an upside down stair at the top there. Then we've got a chiseled nether brick block as like a board, sort of horizontal border going across here. Then we have a right way round nether brick stair here, and then this is a nether brick wall in there. So it's all indented in and creates all these sort of indents across the top section there quite nicely. And then we come down to the blackstone, and again, like the normal stone, blackstone has a variety of different types of blocks in there. You've got the cracked blackstone bricks, we've got the full polished blackstone block, and we've also got just a normal blackstone block in itself, and these mix in nice and well with the blackstone bricks to create this sort of look like there's a little bit of decay going on with the wall here. And then for the pillars, I was trying to work out what to do with these pillars, but I went with, this is just black concrete powder, which is just being left in place. Rather than using the solid black concrete, which would just be too plain, using the black concrete powder has a bit of texture to it, so it sort of stands out a little bit, but it just creates these sort of vertical borders every now and then. And then coming on to the last one here, this is using wood of a variety of kinds here. So the bottom here, we have that idea of the spruce frame made out of spruce logs, and we've used the buttons here as rivets across the top there. But then for the material in here, we've used stairs in here. So we actually created depth inside of here using the spruce stairs. We've got the right way around there, and then upside down stairs at the top there to create a bit of an indent underneath these spruce logs itself. And then up above, we have the lighter colored oak going across with normal row of stairs there, and we've got upside down stairs there, and of course you can see that we've used the spruce trapdoors there in the middle to create sort of a more interesting wooden wall. So hopefully this tutorial has been of some use to you. It's given you some ideas for your own walls. It's not here to tell you how to build your walls, but to give you some ideas that you could then go away and start experiment yourself for your own walls. Whether it's just taking one of the ideas from in here and applying it to your walls to stop it looking so plain, or whether you want to use several of the ideas and combine them together, it's completely up to you. But if you have found this useful and helpful, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe as well, because I will kick out tutorials still every now and then, as well as doing my unorthodox series that I'm involved with at the moment as well. But in the meantime, I've been Draken, and I hope you're all well. Have a great day. Bye.